Hello and welcome to episode 103 of Tom's Hirschsprung's podcast. I am delighted to be joined by Gemma this afternoon. Gemma, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Tom.
Thanks so much for coming on. We have a lot of really interesting topics to discuss that, and I know we'll get on to this later, but lots of these topics do come up with several parents, particularly mothers that I talk to. And so I think what we're going to discuss today is going to be very, very relevant
Mhm.
for so many people who listen to this podcast. But of course, as well, you have a child with Hirschsprungs,
Yes.
who's around 11 months old, if I'm right in saying.
Yeah, so he turns one next month. It's Rowan. So he's my second child. So I had a little boy, Archie, before Rowan. So um, never heard of Hirschsprung's disease before um, at all. So this has been completely new to us. Um, I think in some respects we were quite lucky where we had Rose. So we live in the Bristol area. We didn't have him at the main hospital, St Michael's. We had him at Southmead. And yeah, we were kind of lucky. So I had Ro extremely quickly this time. My labour was really quick and I had high blood pressure, which meant I think unfortunately I had to stay in, but very lucky that I had to stay in after giving birth. And we had, I think, a whole 24 hours, a lovely 24 hours together. And then things started to kind of take a turn. Rove stopped feeding and hadn't passed his first meconium and then started to be sick, kind of the green bile. And I think we had no idea then kind of what was happening. And at that point he was admitted to NICU, which again was an extremely kind of, I guess, scary time, not knowing kind of what was going to happen. And I think you're 24 hours post birth, nobody prepares you for that. Because I think it's something that nobody wants to talk about, either kind of when you're pregnant and things like that. You obviously don't want to be scared. You don't want to talk about the what ifs. But I think when you're in that moment, it's very lonely, kind of just trying to navigate all of that. Um, so he spent, I think it was 3 different bits in the NICU environment over that then next 12 hours, monitoring him. And then the vomit started to really change colour, to go really, really green. And so at that point, I think it was about 3 o'clock in the morning at that point on the 15th. He was born on the 13th of November. And they said, look, we need to admit him. We need to have a check over him, do some tests, do an x-ray, kind of work out what's going on. And they did that. And at that point, they thought he had a blockage in his bowel, or it was twisted. So I kind of went back, not really knowing kind of what that meant, to then be like, you need to pack your bags, we need to go now, he needs to be transferred. So we were transferred down to Bristol Children's Hospital. And again, it was only 20 minutes away, which we were really grateful for. Um, and we were transferred there by ambulance. Again, nobody prepares you for the incubator. They transport your new baby in. Um, you've left them okay. They're not well, obviously, but kind of okay. And then all of a sudden you're faced with, wow, there is something really wrong now, and we don't know what. Um, and then we got to Bristol and we went straight in, and I'll never forget the consultant. Obviously, they were worried about Ro, but he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Now, how are you? Let's get you a cup of tea. Let's make you comfortable." And and that felt like it was the first person who'd actually looked at me and gone, "Yeah, we need to look after her as much as we do, Rowan as well." And I think that grounded me at that point when everything kind of felt out of control. It really felt like it grounded me. And the consultants had looked then at the scan, and because Bristol is one of the like leading surgical places in the southwest to know about Hirschsprungs, um, that was what they thought it then was. That's the first time we'd heard of Hirschsprungs. At that time, I didn't know what they were going to do with Ro, but they did a dilatation. And the poor, surgeon then proceeded to nearly get covered in absolutely everything. And it was one of those lighter moments. He had one of his junior doctors with him, and it went everywhere, and everyone was just like, and it kind of, I guess, those moments you remember the harder moments, but those lighter moments as well. um and that was our, I guess, start of hearing the word Hirschsprungs and kind of entering into that kind of introduction. So yeah. um
Wow. That's yeah, that's I mean that's the thing with Hirschsprungs, isn't it? Is that those first few
mm,
hours and days are just a complete whirlwind of NICU visits, emotions, words that you've never heard of before, because again, why would you? Why would anyone in your situation, and the same for a lot of people's situations, where Hirschsprung's is not in the family in any
no,
capacity whatsoever. And there's no reason why you'd heard of it. So then when they start to mention this word about Hirschsprungs, it then becomes, you then kind of think, okay, what is it? What
yeah,
does the future hold potentially? Yeah, I imagine you had an awful lot of thoughts at that stage.
yeah. And I think we'd gone from 24 hours, relatively, I'd been fine during pregnancy. I had, a relatively smooth birth. We had those, really lucky to have had those lovely first 24 hours together, to then all of a sudden we're in high dependency. And it's like, wow, okay, what is kind of what's going on? How did we get here? And I think we were very lucky again with it being Bristol. We had the surgical doctor that came down to see us that then kind of had a plan. They started to, I guess, talk about Hirschsprungs, and they had the information there in leaflets and stuff, which you don't take in. They're the lengthiest leaflets kind of that you've ever read, and you were trying to get your head around, actually, it's congenital. It's been like this since he was, developed in the womb, and here we are. And yeah, I think it's just surreal. And then someone walks in, and luckily for us, they had started Rowan antibiotics at Southmead. So very soon it was like, he doesn't need to be in high dependency. We can go to the surgical ward. He's got to have his NG tube in. He's got to keep everything else in, but actually you can hold him now, and we will come back and speak to you tomorrow about, what's going to happen. I think he was stable enough to kind of look at us and think, I think they've been through enough today, because I think we just looked like we'd been hit by a bus.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a lot.
Yeah.
When you start to talk about it, you think, I do remember some things, but there's some things that yeah, I don't remember. There's so many gaps. Yeah.
and that's a sort of, I guess, a trauma response, isn't it? Slightly
Yeah.
of because everything is going on at once.
Hmm.
And like you said, you've gone from those first 24 hours of complete normality
Yeah.
to 48 hours later, everything is whirlwind and you're off here, there, and everywhere. And the brain can't necessarily respond to absolutely everything.
No.
And so it is going to block some things out. It is going to protect you, I guess, in a way.
Yeah. And I think, um, obviously, we can talk about his journey a little bit more, but I think the kind of postpartum things, you have just given birth, you're trying to recover yourself, you've been transferred by ambulance, you may or may not have your stuff with you. Um, y- you know, you are in absolute agony trying to listen, trying to be there, trying to take everything in. I mean, I don't think I'd slept for 48 hours, and I think the trauma of NICU as well. I was actually too scared as a mother to go into NICU when he was admitted. Um and I guess this is quite vulnerable. If you're not there, it's not happening. And then I kind of went back to the ward, and unfortunately, they didn't have any space for me. So I was there without my baby, which was, kind of upsetting as it was. And I think that whole postpartum um, bit, when, you do have a sick child, that mental health support and, maybe having mentors or someone to just notice the mum. They are busy, they do their best, and we are, exceptionally grateful for all the help that we've had. But I think the mum is just, or dad is just expected to kind of buckle up, which you'll do naturally, but it's a lot. It really, really is a lot. And in that moment, I think that kind of shaped our journey in the beginning, that trauma at the beginning, and how hard it was to cope and, I guess, process things. Yeah.
Definitely. And we can definitely talk about that because I know I alluded to that at the start, and I know we'll
Yeah.
get back to Rowan's journey
Yeah.
a little bit later on. But it is something that I obviously I talk to mums an awful lot through doing this podcast. And it is something that I see more and more and more about needing support for mums because,
Yeah.
like you said, I mean, even if Hirschsprung's was in the family, and I've spoken to parents before who've had
Mm.
multiple children with Hirschsprung, so you
Yeah.
sort of know what's coming, kind of. It's still
Yeah.
traumatic then. So I can't imagine what it's like if there's no history whatsoever, and then suddenly you're hit, like you said, absolutely blindsided
Yeah.
with all of these medical terminologies that you've now got to be an expert in: dilations,
Yeah.
washouts, Hirschsprungs, ganglion cells, all sorts of things that you've suddenly got to
Yeah.
know, and as well as having going through everything that you've just been through, having just given birth, which is an unbelievable um, amount of energy that you're having to
Yeah.
take from that as well. It's it's I can't imagine quite how that all copes and fits together. I mean, it's when it's sort of, I guess when it's possibly when it's happening in the moment, you kind of navigate. But
Yeah.
now that it's sort of, then you all lay it out as to what happened, and it's unbelievable.
Yeah. And it it is. And I think it's all I can explain is it was like I was watching a medical documentary. It was like I was watching, I don't know, Casualty or something like that. I was in it, but I wasn't quite, because I wasn't having a sick child. I was like nobody ever knows that they are. And, it's not just Hirschsprungs, it's everything like around that postpartum experience if you have a child that's unwell. But all of a sudden, our specialist bowel nurses turn up and they're like, we're going to learn how to do bowel washouts. And I'm like, sorry. And they come at you with all this equipment. And I'm like, no, 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 we need to wait until my partner comes. And they were like, no, we need to learn. And our specialist bowel nurse, we've got Claire and Hilary, and bless them, I needed them that day because they just took one look at me and they were like, but whether you want to or not right now, we're going to do this together. And it was that kind of like, I needed somebody at that point to just be like, we can do this. We can do this together, no matter how long it takes. We're gonna, do it. And I think you just think stuff like that. Or does a district nurse not come out? Does a pediatric nursing team not come out? It's like, oh, okay, it's us. And you're just, even with that in recovery, there was times I was stood up doing a washout and then halfway through I'd get dizzy, so I'd have to sit down and then we'd have to carry on again. And it's like, with the catheter and everything else, all hospitals do it different, but the up and down and things like that. And you're just like, how I sit there and think, how did I do that? And you're sharing a shower on a children's ward with other families, and you're recovering postpartum, and then you're like, you go to ask for some pain relief. We're in a children's hospital, you can't have any. So then I've all of a sudden run out of paracetamol, and then if my partner wasn't coming for a little while, oh well, I don't have any pain relief for a little while. And it's simple things like that. And it's not that they don't want to help you. They're helping the people that you want them to help, your children, to make them better and to care for them. But I think, yeah, it's very raw. You feel vulnerable. You're walking around the hospital where, you'd be sat at home feeding comfortably in bed, or being able to have a shower, or, in your own comfy clothes, and not having to feel as vulnerable as you do. And I think that was a real shock to the system in those 12 days of feeling so alone, and those nights as well. I don't know if it's just Ro, but when he had washouts, he was then starving. And within our hospital, we did them 12 hours apart. And if that was too late, that was my night then over and done with. And I remember the consultant coming in the morning and being like, are you okay? And I'd be like, I went to bed at 4. And he'd be like, you've been awake from 8 till 4 when I saw, and I'd be like, yeah. And I think he saw me like 3 days, and it was him again that just took one look at me and went, what can we do? Like, we still have to do the washouts, but what can we do for you? And we moved them earlier. It meant I got a little bit of sleep. And it was just those simple acts of kindness from different nurses, different doctors, of actually looking at me and thinking, we need to support this mum to be able to support her little boy, to be able to, get through this. And, it's a lot. You don't ever expect your baby that you, I guess, should be enjoying, should be cuddling, having lots of that skin to skin, to kind of become this object that you're having to do medical procedures to. And, that's a lot postpartum as well. It's not what you signed up to, but it's, you don't look at it in that way when you're in it, that you are still caring for them, you are doing the best for them. It's actually more traumatizing, I think, in that beginning part. Yeah.
Most definitely. There's 2 points you made there, which is really, really interesting. One of which sounds really good, that the hospital were really on it with you, which is something that I will forever advocate for, because obviously if you're really struggling, then that's not going to be the best for Ro. So to look, it's sort of a look at looking at the whole picture. and
Yeah.
making sure that the parents are, especially the mother, is okay, or as okay as you can be, I guess, at that stage.
Yeah.
So that I think is a really, really interesting point. Really good that the hospital were checking in on you, and it wasn't just constantly everything
Yeah.
surrounding Roe. Um, the second part you said, or the second point you made, when it was kind of you felt as though you were watching yourself, and that again, that kind of I have heard that once or twice before from people where it doesn't feel real
Yeah.
and it feels as though you're watching somebody else go through this. And I don't know if you can describe kind of what that felt like, but that must be feeling incredibly strange.
Yeah. So, on a side note, I've been having EMDR therapy to deal with trauma as part of this whole process. And it's in that when I first started to explain that, because I said I was just sat there, and it's almost like you can smell smells, you can see things, it's a picture, but you can hear no noise. So people are speaking to you, and I'm probably nodding, I'm probably going, yeah. But like when he initially went into NICU, I heard antibiotics, I heard tube, and then he went. And then it was, I was walking back to the ward on my own, down this long corridor with nobody. And it was like, why? And then also in hospital, I'm sat there, and you know, they're doing the washout in front of me, and I'm just there, and again, it's like I can picture it, it's all memories and stuff like that. But I remember almost then coming back out of it when they heard, do you understand? And being like, I think I just went, I don't know. And I said, I don't think, I said, I just, I don't know. And Claire was like, "Don't worry, we'll come back tomorrow and we'll try again. You know, I'll leave you with the equipment tonight. You have a look at it, familiarize yourself with it. It's nothing scary." But they'd been there for an hour. They'd been there for an hour doing that whole procedure. And I was just, and that's all I can explain. You can see it happening, you're there in the moment, and you can remember smells or touches. I can remember what I was wearing or stuff like that. But the actual what was being said or anything, yeah, not a clue. And it's it's really strange, but it's almost like I guess your body's safety response to what you're going through.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think, a lot of mums will probably say, I probably didn't think this was real until they actually came and said to us, "We've had the results back from the biopsy. This is what it is. This is, and then they start to talk more, like we said about, is it in the family? Is it this, that? That's when I think you're like, oh, we've got to think about this now. We've got to actually, we're sat talking about it. We're not being shown things aren't being rushed. It doesn't feel chaos. And I think you then kind of settle in a little bit. But those initial bits, yeah, it's almost like some weird disassociation to get through because you're so tired, you're so upset, you're so traumatized, you're so worried, you're, everything's so unexpected. Um, yeah, it's really
definitely.
strange.
That's a good word, actually, disassociation from it, because
Yeah,
it's like you say, you know you're in that moment, but it's not quite real, I
yeah,
guess. And
yeah,
that's yeah, it's and I imagine there's a lot of parents who've been through that particular part where everything has changed so fast
yeah,
and so far from anything that you knew 24 hours previous
yeah,
that it is going to and that is going to create trauma. That's
Yeah.
absolutely going to create trauma, and yeah, I mean it's such a difference in those early stages that that's going to be yeah, a monumental challenge.
Yeah, and your baby, it's simple things like your baby's nil by mouth, and you know, I'm pumping. I'm just sat there pumping, 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 and being awake that long and probably not eating properly and not getting enough rest, and you're just, yeah, you it almost you're just sat there like, yeah, just why? What's going on? What for? Why us? What's happened? We don't know why. We don't have any family history. You're just trying to make sense of everything whilst trying, but it's also just feeling like you're watching your baby. Like
Mhm.
there's not much you can do, and your natural instinct as a parent is to make everything better, to to do that. And I think when a lot of it is taken out of your hands, it's that really difficult space to be in. And I really did find that at night as well, within that postpartum bit, you his quiet night would traumatize me. We're behind a blue curtain on a ward. There's poor children being wheeled in after having surgery, and Rose losing his mind when they've just got his pain control, their pain under control. And it's also that you're already having a tough time, and you're worrying about other people when you should just be recovering and having that time. And yeah, it's a strange place to be in that hospital stay and that environment for sure in the beginning.
Is it a feeling, I guess, as well? Because, like you said, you just want to make everything better and you want to make
Yeah.
everything right. So is it almost like a kind of like helplessness feeling as well?
Yeah, I think it was because I think um there was about 5 or 6 days whilst we were waiting before having the biopsy. So had Hirschsprungs. We didn't know whether it was. I guess we'd started the procedures. They were terrifying to begin with. You're not used to it. It doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel like something you should do. You're worrying about weight, how much fluid you put, all of that stuff, getting used to the equipment. And you're doing it with different nurses in the evening. You're not doing it with your specialist nurses all the time. Or if Mike's there, we're taking the lead on it and we're like, hang on, we had a nurse helping us yesterday. No, it's just us. And it's, yeah, you just think it's not what I should be doing. And like I said, I think it was that defining point of we'd had that biopsy, and I think it was then another 5 days. So then we started to talk about family history and things like that. And then the results came back, and we were told that he had Hirschsprungs. Um, and yeah, we were in for, I think, another 4 days after that, um, to get him stable. Obviously, you have to get signed off in being able to do the washouts before you can kind of go home. So yeah, it was a whole 14 days of just chaos, it felt like. It didn't feel like you could enjoy any of it either, which feels really sad. And it makes you feel bad saying that because you're lucky you've had your baby, they've got here safely. You should feel grateful, you should feel happy. And I think it's really hard as a mum to admit that it's not always like that. There was moments of joy and moments of, those little moments of you'd see that little bit of light when you were sat there with your partner in the room with Rowan, and you'd have a little laugh or something like that. But that fortnight was very, very raw, and I'm sure it is for a lot of parents with Hirschsprungs. You're looking on the internet, you're reading the pamphlets that you've been given, trying to understand. And because it's such a broad spectrum, everyone's journey is so different. You can either be terrified looking stuff up or being like, okay, we can do this. But in that space, there's just so many unknowns, so many.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the really, really difficult bit, I think, isn't it? Especially from where you are at this point with
mhm.
Rory's nearly one,
Yeah,
and you're having all of the same thoughts that every parent I've spoken to who has a child
yeah,
around that age is having, what's next for the future, etc., etc.
yeah.
And you're right, it is such a broad spectrum.
Hmm.
Even when you've kind of nailed it down to short segments,
Yes.
and so I mean, there's like 5 different types, and
Yeah,
then kind of nail it down to short segment and go, right, okay, what do we know on short segment? And then there's still another 100 odd things that could potentially be this, that, the other. I know I'd speak to Georgina, who runs the Hirschsprungs.co.uk
yeah,
website, and trying to put all of the information on there to cover all of
yeah,
the different types, to cover all of the different, potentials, things like enterocolitis and all of these other
yeah,
things you have to think about. It's just, I mean, the website's going to be so much bigger when it's finished, I
yeah.
think.
It's such a fantastic it's such a fantastic resource, and I think I came across Georgina by accident from your podcast. Our specialist bowel nurses shared about your podcast to us
Oh,
before we
brilliant.
left hospital. Yeah, and so that's how we came across Georgina, and then obviously I followed her on Instagram, and she set up that website. And I think, regardless of it not being the same for everybody, there is something you will find on there that resonates with you, that helps you, that can help you to understand, or be a little bit more informed, and stuff like that. And it's a safe space. It's .co.uk. It's not just random
Yeah.
anything. It feels safe. It feels, trusted. There's links to some of the main hospitals. Her little boy's treated at one of the leading places as well. It feels relatable. It feels, good. And you know, I think it's absolutely amazing, what they've been through as well, to make such a positive, out of a very difficult time, to help others. And it really is good, because nobody, when we start out on this journey with Hirschsprungs, knows what it's gonna be like. And it's certainly kind of hour by hour, day by day, for a lot of those beginning early months or years, um, for people.
Definitely, definitely. And I think that's the really tricky thing, isn't it? It's the slight unknown of Hirschsprung's, because again, and just to sort of flip it around a little bit, I talk to parents who say, okay, well, we had the pull through, it was a difficult time at the beginning, but now they're 5, 6, 10,
Hmm.
whatever, doing really well, no issues. So there is, I think it's important sometimes to point out there is that side to it as well, that
Absolutely.
people kind of, I've interviewed a few people where they kind of said, "Oh, I don't really know what to say because things are going well, and I don't, I haven't got a huge story, so I just want to say things are going well." And I love those
Mm.
stories as well. So I think as much as a lot of the things that you may hear, especially on here and Instagram and Facebook and whatever, there'll be a lot of people asking questions and saying,
Yeah.
"Well, this has happened. What do I use for this?" and washouts and blah 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 blah. There are a lot of really good feel-good stories out there, and there are probably more than we realize, because I guess people don't necessarily share if they've got nothing going on.
And I guess this is the space we are in. And I have been kind of wanting to do this podcast, and, having the short segment. And I think our journey, um, I don't know if lucky is the right word, it feeling smoother than most. I feel we were lucky for being in Bristol, close to the hospital, a unit that's maybe used to Hirschsprung's, knows of it,
Yeah.
and things like that. He was very textbook. If you went down the list of symptoms 48 hours later, he hit a lot of them. And being Bristol, they knew their stuff about it as well and could explain to us and have those, conversations. I think it was hard. You didn't want to link in with support groups or anything in the beginning because you almost didn't want to know how bad or good things may have been. It was just like it felt a scary space to be in. I think Row, we did washouts for 3.5 months, twice daily with Row. And then we had his pull through surgery in February this year, at Bristol. And yeah, I think that's another day postpartum again that you don't expect to be handing over such a small baby to have surgery when you've never experienced anything like that before. And just that day negotiating the consent forms and everything like that, actually how much you sign for, how much is unknown, and the surgeon saying, don't worry, if we're down for hours, it really doesn't, it doesn't matter. It's not an indication. You know, when they say the biopsies, when they're doing them in the surgery live, can take up to 45 minutes to come back. So she was like, don't be worried if we leave in the morning and we don't come back till 8 o'clock at night. It doesn't mean anything's wrong. It just means we're being kind of thorough and, to check everything. And you're almost sat there and you're just like, what is going to happen? You know, it that is a very hard place to be in as well, because ultimately you're never going to know that outcome until the outcome comes, till your surgeon walks back through your curtain in your room. And I think, we were again, Ray's operation went well. He had 15 to 20 centimeters removed, and reconnected. And his recovery, I think we were in hospital for 6 days afterwards. Um, and that stay again was smooth, but it does take you right back again, being on that same ward with the same people, the same nurses, lying next to them again where they're vulnerable, all their drips and everything. And yeah, I don't think you're never prepared to say goodbye to your child in that way, to have an operation and then their recovery. It's hard as a parent, but I think I do feel conflicted sometimes, I guess, about sharing our journey because it has been somewhat smooth. Yeah.
But I think that's good. I
Yeah.
just, it's like you said, some people don't want to go on the forums and the Facebook forums and whatnot because as much as there's some really good stuff on there, there's a lot of, I mean, it's Facebook. There's everything under
Yeah.
the sun on there. There's the good stuff. There's the not so great stuff. There's the question about this and question about that. And I think some people do kind of just leave that alone and they go, I just don't want to, I don't want to see that. And I totally,
Yeah.
totally get that. Totally get it.
I think it's the headspace you're in. As you get further along in your journey, you become more inquisitive. You want to find people. When you've, I guess, got over that initial bit, in your normal life, it feels like you can't relate to anybody anymore in some respects because it is so rare. Because you may get lucky if someone has heard of somebody, but if you're not, then it does feel lonely. And I think as you meet different milestones or different pathways within your treatment, to then try and find people to be like, oh, okay, I found somebody today with short segment Hirschsprungs, and they're around 10 months old, the same age as Roe, and they've had this, and you're like, oh, that's really helpful to read. Or you start to become, when you wean them, oh, is anyone worried about any different types of food? Or does anything, because again, you are the expert for your own child in some ways, and everything is so different that I think when you get to that certain point, you almost need those helps and those tips to kind of learn your new normal and just move on a little bit from that initial, yeah,
Yeah.
stage, I feel. And I do find it more helpful now. I didn't in the beginning, but I definitely do now, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's one of those things, isn't it, where it's kind of it's there for people who want it when they want it. And I think the when is really important.
Yes. Yeah.
Very, very important. So I guess as we sort of round out towards the end here, in terms of the future, let's start future for Rowan.
Yeah.
What did kind of, well, I guess both medically and non-medically, what do you see in his future?
Yeah. So, we recently, for Hirschsprung's Awareness Month, and again, by chance, we didn't realize September was Hirschsprung's Awareness Month, that we set out to do a 24-hour row. So, a row for Rowan, to raise money for Bristol Children's Hospital to give back for, the care we've received from Rowan. So, I think we're nearly on about £4,800, which we will dedicate 1,500 to the Cots for Tots, that specialist kind of ambulance and things that transferred him to Southmead. And they were so kind. They gave him a certificate and a leaflet and a little hat and a little dummy. And it said, you've been very brave today, and transferred. And he'll never know that because he'll never remember. But it's, those things for the memory box. And, you know, they were so lovely in that moment of what felt like sheer desperation. So we wanted to give something back to that. And we're also going to give a large proportion to the surgical ward, Penguin Ward, which he had his surgery on and he stayed on, again, to benefit other people, and some for the Grand Appeal. We're very keen to turn a negative into a positive, and we were very lucky to live just 7 miles away from Bristol. Um, and, I met some incredible mums while I was in there, that had travelled from Devon, from Cornwall, stories of their partners, because there was a music concert on in Bristol, having to pay £300 for hotels overnight whilst they were waiting for the hospital accommodation, because, it is full sometimes. And I think, we really wanted to make a positive impact for other parents, in that, with it being the leading surgical unit, and to try and ease some of those pressures and things like that. We may not have experienced them ourselves, but I think it's good to do good. So, we've done that, and I think we're going to get back to go to the hospital, to present them with a check, which will be lovely to do. Um, and I think for myself and Rowan, I've been lucky enough as a mum to be given, EMDR therapy, through the birth trauma and loss team. Um, Again, which has been so helpful in this journey. And I know it's not available to everybody, but I think what I would say, and us talking about that postpartum, do reach out. You may come across people, medical professionals, that don't validate what you've been through, because it's very much about your child, but your story isn't, your story is there. It has happened to you. You have been postpartum in a world which you didn't expect. And I think I've been doing this since June now, and it has been a huge help. It's shaping the way I want to be a mum for Ro. And I think, as we get to his first birthday in November, of course it's going to be difficult going back and all those firsts again, where we were this time last year. And I think it's just carrying on to take things as they come. He's just started nursery now, so that comes with a whole world of, um, challenges and nervousness and it being winter and things like that. We've had to go in for a couple of suspected enterocolitis um, so far, but that is obviously a worry. So I think for us now, it's trying to get through winter unscathed, enjoying this year's Christmas period looking a bit different, and just having that family time and appreciating and reflecting on the last year. And yeah, I think doing things like this, hopefully being able to do more and give a bit more back, and yeah, to hopefully link in with um, some local families and stuff like that. We're very lucky that Bristol has a Facebook support group for if you've been through Bristol with Hirschsprungs. Um, there is a Facebook group there as well. So I think when I feel more like sharing my story and stuff like that, and I'm back to work because I've had extended leave to have the therapy to help with the last year. Yeah, so I think yeah, that's kind of where we're at. Just trying to look forward. It's obviously you never know how things are going to go, but just to appreciate things and have that time as a family back again.
Absolutely. Well, I really, really appreciate you coming on, telling your story, because as I said at the start, there'll be a lot of parents who I know will find this incredibly beneficial. So I
Yeah.
really, really appreciate you coming on, because I know it's been a tough one. So it's I
Yeah,
really, really do appreciate it. And I know it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, that I wish you, Rowan, and your whole family the very, very best for the future.
thank you. Thank you.